About History series. 3 major popular rebellions in Taiwan during Qing.
Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're unpacking a truly chaotic, absolutely fascinating era in history. Qing ruled Taiwan. We're going to break down over 2 centuries of history to understand exactly how power, rebellion, and systemic division completely shaped the island. So get ready, because we are jumping straight into the heart of a very turbulent time. Okay, let's dive right in. 3 years, a small revolt. 5 years, a big one. This famous historical saying perfectly captures the reality of the era. The Qing government, ruling from the mainland, essentially treated Taiwan like enemy territory. It was basically an occupied colony, rather than an integrated part of their empire. They had very little genuine interest in governing it well, and, well, as you can imagine, when you treat people with suspicion and neglect, you don't exactly inspire loyalty. Instead, you fuel a relentless cycle of unrest. And just look at what that unrest actually translates to in hard data. Historical researchers estimate that during the Qing's 211-year rule of Taiwan, the island saw anywhere from 120 to a staggering 784 uprisings. I mean, really think about that volume. That is just wild. It proves just how volatile and inherently unstable the island truly was under this administration. It wasn't just, a few isolated incidents. Rebellion was literally a chronic condition of the society. To make sense of all this history, here's our roadmap. First, we'll cover the turbulent background. Second, the Duck King. Third, the Heaven and Earth Society. Fourth, the longest rebellion. And finally, division tactics and social impact. So, let's start with Section 1, the turbulent background. We're looking at a perfect powder keg here. First off, official government policy was deeply rooted in distrust, viewing the island as hostile territory. Because the official government presence was just so alienating and neglectful, the common people had to look elsewhere for protection and community. This led to a massive rise in secret societies, like the famous Heaven and Earth Society. Add to this mix a heavy layer of rampant corruption and extortion by the officials stationed there, and you've got a society where an uprising isn't just a possibility, it's pretty much an inevitability.
Moving on to Section 2, the Duck King.
I absolutely love this historical detail. Zhu Yigui was a 31-year-old duck farmer. He was famously hospitable, earning the nickname Uncle Duck. But local legend says he actually commanded his massive flocks of ducks using a cane, maneuvering them as if they were a highly disciplined military unit. It sounds whimsical, right? But this very same man would soon go from raising ducks to raising and commanding a rebel army of 300,000 people.
Let's see how this builds. In 1721, a major earthquake and high tides struck the island. To thank the gods for their survival, the citizens organized a traditional opera. But local officials, seeing a crowd, used it as an excuse to arbitrarily arrest over 40 people, demanding bribes for their release. When citizens naturally fled to the mountains, authorities arrested 200 more, beating those who couldn't pay. It was this exact moment of brazen extortion that pushed Zhu Yigui and his peers over the edge. They declared an armed uprising, intending to completely overthrow the Qing and restore the old Ming Dynasty. But, unfortunately for them, the momentum just didn't last. Zhu Yigui had a crucial Hakka ally named Du Junying, and almost the second it captured Tainan, a fatal power struggle erupted. Du felt his contributions were greater and wanted his own son to be declared king. Zhu refused. So the rebel forces completely fractured, splitting into warring factions. This internal division perfectly set up the Qing military's ultimate strategy. The Qing government pounced on this fracture. They officially lured Du Junying in, promising him rewards if he would attack Zhu from behind. Du took the bait. But of course, the Qing had no intention of actually rewarding a rebel. This perfectly illustrates the Qing's divide and conquer strategy, literally using Taiwanese to fight Taiwanese. In the end, despite Zhu's cooperation, both he and Zhu Yigui were shipped off to Beijing, where both were brutally drawn and quartered. Zhu was only 32 years old.
That brings us to Section 3, Heaven and Earth Society.
Because of the ongoing unrest, the Heaven and Earth Society grew incredibly fast. The Qing government basically panicked and launched a violent crackdown, burning and looting. In response, a leader named Lin Shuangwen gathered an army of 100,000 men and declared a full-on rebellion, quickly capturing major Western cities. What's absolutely fascinating about the historical context here is that while America and France were dreaming of modern democracy around this exact same time, Lin Shuangwen's massive revolutionary army in the East was fighting to simply install a brand new emperor. Now, what's really interesting about this next part is the emergence of the Yimin, or the Righteous Army. As Lin's 100,000 rebels swept through the land, they unfortunately trampled fields and looted properties. In response, ordinary civilians and indigenous groups formed their own local militias to protect their homes. It's really vital to note that these militias were not necessarily pro-Qing government. They were simply anti-looting and pro-stability. But by fighting the rebels to protect their own property, they ended up acting as a crucial military ally for the Qing.
The Qing government was so terrified by Lin's success that Emperor Qianlong actually deployed 10,000 elite mainland troops to Taiwan. With the help of those Yimin militias, they finally crushed Lin, who, just like Zhu, was executed in Beijing at age 32. But here's an amazing little historical artifact anecdote for you. Emperor Qianlong was so proud of this victory that he ordered 10 massive memorial stone steels carved to celebrate. However, during transport, one of these heavy steels sank right into the ocean. It was literally lost underwater for over a century before being discovered, recovered, and it actually sits in Tainan today. All right, let's jump to Section 4, the longest rebellion.
I want you to notice the stark contrast here. Our first rebel, Zhu Yigui, was a duck farmer, right? Dai Chaochun, on the other hand, was a highly wealthy landlord. He had actually formed a local defense force, a branch of the Heaven and Earth Society, that was initially approved by the government to help keep the peace. But his influence grew so massive, with tens of thousands of members, that the Qing grew paranoid and launched a bloody crackdown against him. This really shows us that the systemic unrest and government paranoia in Taiwan affected absolutely every tier of society, from the poorest farmer all the way to the wealthiest elite.
Once Dai was forced into rebellion in 1862, he quickly captured Changhua and essentially set up an independent kingdom, even handing out royal titles to his allies. Now, why did this specific rebellion last an agonizing 3 years? Well, because over on the mainland, the Qing Empire was entirely distracted fighting the massive Taiping rebellion. They had 0 troops to send. So for years, the Qing government had to rely almost entirely on other wealthy Taiwanese landlords to fight Dai Chaochun on their behalf. Reinforcements finally arrived in 1864, which led to Dai's surrender and execution in 1865. Let's wrap things up with Section 5, Division Tactics and Social Impact. So the crucial point is the pattern that emerges here. The Qing survived not through overwhelming administrative competence, but through weaponizing local divisions. When the duck farmer rebelled, the Qing used Hakka militias to crush him. When the secret society rebelled, civilian militias helped put it down. When a wealthy landlord rebelled, the government empowered rival landlords to fight him. They consistently used Taiwanese locals to fight other Taiwanese locals just to maintain their grip on power.
And this divide-and-conquer tactic literally redistributed the wealth and power of the entire island. Because the Qing relied on local elites to fight Dai Chaochun, those elites were heavily rewarded. The Wufeng Lin family is the perfect example of this. Because they fought on the side of the government, they were granted massive tracts of confiscated land, immense wealth, and a highly lucrative monopoly on camphor across all of Fujian province. The old landlords were wiped out, and powerful new dynasties like the Wufeng Lin family, who became one of Taiwan's top 5 most powerful families, were created virtually overnight. Which brings us to a final profound question to leave you with today. Did the Qing's reliance on local militias to crush these rebellions actually secure their empire? Or, by giving land, military experience, and wealth to these local factions, did they accidentally build the powerful, independent Taiwanese families that would eventually go on to shape the island's modern future? It is a fascinating historical paradox to consider. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and keep questioning the history you see.